start ready to cut the music? Can everybody hear me upstairs? Welcome to the Flamingo Cantina. Welcome to TXNORML's monthly open meeting. Invite all your friends next time because you're going to have such a good time and enjoy all the information you're going to tell them all about and visit our table, right? So that means everybody knows what they're here for. But if you don't, if somebody dragged you here or you just wandered in, we're TXNORML and we are one of over 150 chapters of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. And we mostly do events in the greater Austin area, but there are other chapters in Texas, so please make sure and tell your friends, tell everybody you know that this is going on in Texas, that there is a legalization movement and they need to be a part of it because that is the only way that we're going to make this happen. So thank you all for coming out, and thank you to Flamingo Cantina again for always having us here. It's been, 3 years I think now that we've probably been here. So cheers to them for opening up early for you. And make sure to treat them well. Is it anybody's first meeting tonight? A couple of first timers? So somebody suggested I do this thing that make everybody uncomfortable like they do in church and say hi to your stranger nearest you. So you guys can say hi properly when you enjoy your community, but say hi. I mean, say hi to people you don't know, especially if you're a member of this organization. You see people you don't know, you don't recognize, and it's their first time. Let them know why you're involved or what you've learned. You know, just have a conversation when you see people here that you don't know because we're all coming here for the same reason. And some of us here are on the board. My name is Cheyenne Weldon. I'm the executive director. We have Dave Bass is our veterans liaison, director of veterans outreach, behind the table. We have another Dave Weinke, right next to him, who helps us with events. See who else is here. Rick is videoing for us. He's our historian, and right next to him is Vincent Lopez, our director of patient outreach. He's also our guest speaker tonight. And a lot of what we're going to be talking about is kind of some medical polls and studies in other states. So, and we have an announcement, and Vincent has a meeting coming up that we're going to be talking about. So he's here. Let's see who else. Lori is here. She helps us with membership and technical issues, which we have sometimes. Deb is somewhere down here, and she's helping us put together a senior alliance. Greg, sitting right behind her, heads up our athletic group, Team Hope Through Cannabis. And I think that's it for, wait, Topher is somewhere. Topher's upstairs. Topher does a lot of our activities and social outreach, so he is here as well. And if you get to know us and have any questions, please find out whatever you can, and we want you to be the source for other people so that the message we're giving you here tonight doesn't end here, that you're taking it forward and you're spreading it to other people. And you know, it's a Ponzi scheme, right? But what we get is not money unless you count the money that we save ourselves and not being arrested, and the money that we'll reap in a completely new industry. So it's not the bad kind of Ponzi scheme.
Yeah.
All right, so what we're doing here, we're all volunteers. All those people I just introduced to you, we're all volunteers, and there's a few more people that couldn't be here. We all have other jobs, and we need help. So if you're interested in volunteering, you can sign up at our table, sign up on our email list for our newsletter, go by the table and pick up extra handouts, not just your own that you think, oh, I have that information or I can get that online. Before you leave, pick up a few extras so that when you have conversations with people, when you're wearing your TXNORML shirt or button and you start a conversation, then you have something to give them that they can take away. You're not relying on them to go look up information that you told them. So the handouts that we put forward are not just for your information, they're for your use. And our members help us by donating funds and purchasing memberships, purchasing merchandise, and allowing us to print that. So that's for our use and your use to help spread this mission. And what we really need is to get it outside of just Austin. That's one of the things I want to briefly touch on before I get on to the news, is that we have to change our drug laws on a statewide level in Texas. So that limits us in some of the ways that other states can go about influencing the communities, influencing the lawmakers, that steadily, city by city, they can make it a ticket only or a fine only. That doesn't exist in Texas. So we also cannot collect signatures for a ballot initiative like most of the states or if not all of the states, have achieved a change in marijuana laws by. So that limits us to going through our legislature, and that means voting, and that means everybody trying to get on board on the same page, and we're a big state. So what happens in Austin doesn't necessarily reflect what's happening in North Texas, in West Texas, or East Texas. But surely you guys know people that are in those areas, and you can let them know that we exist and this is the information we're putting out there. And that there's a chapter in El Paso now, that there's a chapter in Lubbock, there's 2 chapters in Houston, 1 in DFW, there's 1 in Waco, there's multiple student chapters, and it's not that difficult to start a chapter. I was in El Paso in September. They had a meeting to see if there was interest to start a meeting. 40 people showed up. Now they have a chapter 2 months later. So you just have to have, it's reflective of the movement that there are people that are willing to commit their time and volunteer and donate their time and sometimes our money too. You know, nobody pays for our gas to get around and things like that. We're not using the funds that you give us for that. So, not always anyway. I mean, if we go far, sometimes we might need some gas, but not for everything. We are putting forward our time and money. And what's also reflective of what's happening, that the movement is being successful in Texas, is that we're getting funds donated. Not just that people are getting memberships, not just that people are buying merchandise, but that people are willing to actually just give us their money. In August, we announced that we were part of a coalition with Marijuana Policy Project and other organizations and NORML chapters, hiring a lobby firm in Austin to work with us through the end of the next legislative session, which is through May 2015, basically, now through then. And we have raised, since that announcement, which was in August, and I believe it was late August, we've raised almost $5,000. So that's just for that campaign, just for donations alone. And thank you guys for that. And that's mostly a lot of single donors. There were 2 big donors, $1,000 each, basically, and the rest of it is all small donations. People are pledging monthly online so that you get a monthly deduction from your account at whatever level you choose, or you can do one-time donations. You can do it at our table. But essentially, when you make a donation, you guys have to just understand that you're paying for the work that we're doing, and if you believe in it, then that should be a good investment, and we hope that you're willing to. And if you don't have that available, we also need help. We need help volunteering at tables like here every month, and at other events and meetings that you can help us with. You could work with a board member, and they would walk you through what we do, and it just gets you a little more involved in the process and helps us. The more you help us, the sooner we win, right?
Yep.
Okay, so to get into a little bit of the news that's happened, it's a little slower than sometimes, but I've got a couple of medical studies I want to mention to you guys. I don't think any of this will be very surprising. There's a study out of Boston where patients with Crohn's disease and inflammatory bowel disease are reporting relief from cannabis. The authors of this study in the journal Inflammatory Bowel Disease state that the patients perceive that medical marijuana is helpful for treating abdominal pain, poor appetite, and nausea. So I think the wording is a little strange that the patients perceive that, but over 300 patients with more than 50% of them having firsthand experience with cannabis, and over 16% saying they use it for their symptoms. And there was a study earlier this year that said that actual inhalation of cannabis, not just edibles or tinctures, reduces symptoms in Crohn's patients who had been unresponsive to traditional therapies. I don't personally think that we need to go through traditional therapies before we try a plant, but that's kind of the way that the medical community sometimes looks at this. Even though another study reports that Crohn's patients who use cannabis end up requiring fewer disease-related surgeries. So we're still getting like a slant from the medical community, but it's getting out there. We have another study out of the Netherlands that over 950 people surveyed in a web survey prefer herbal cannabis, plant cannabis, versus pharmaceuticals that are infused with cannabis or made with cannabinoids. And I don't think that's probably a shock to anybody that most people prefer the natural whole plant to Marinol and other types of medications that are being developed. They found them, the majority found them to be more cost effective with fewer side effects. And they were able to titrate their dosage easier with smoking or closely followed by vaporizing. So if you don't know the term titration, I learned that when I got into this movement. It's just basically being able to gauge for yourself pretty easily and quickly whether you need more of a substance to have an effect or not. So like alcohol has a delayed effect, so you can't immediately know, oh, okay, that's enough or that's not enough. Sometimes people overdo it. Whereas cannabis, if you're smoking it or you're vaporizing it, you get an immediate effect, so you can gauge whether that's enough or not. And the other medical topic I wanted to mention is completely relevant. So we see this slant in the medical community, this lack of research and knowledge, and the American Medical Association continuing to oppose marijuana legalization, although they have softened their language a little bit. So everything's coming in increments and steps. They're just not going to come out and be completely polar opposite from what they've stated since 1977. Although the American Medical Association was originally opposed to the idea of prohibition in the 30s and in 1970 when the Controlled Substances Act was created. So it would really be just reversing their position to go back. But they're doing it incrementally. And their statement previously had urged for basically decriminalization for possession. And they've now replaced that language, calling on states and the federal government to modify laws and put emphasis on public health-based strategies to address and reduce cannabis use, but also to treat personal possession with health-based strategies rather than incarceration. So this is sort of like if you've heard of Project SAM, this third way of legalization where they say, oh, okay, we don't want to lock you up for using that plant. We're just going to send you to treatment. You're just sick. So that is an avenue that I think is being pursued because they no longer can justify locking people up. So it's sort of their idea of a compromise that they can try to hold on to one idea or value that they've been saying for all these years. And I just look at it like, okay, that's one less thing to argue about. Now we're going to focus on whether it's addictive. You've established that it shouldn't be a crime. So I still consider it to be progress. And more importantly, their House of Delegates determined that the federal anti-marijuana policies are ineffective. They determined that, so nobody else has been saying that for years. But they called for a review. The American Medical Association has called for a review of the risks and benefits of Colorado and Washington's laws. So what we're seeing with those laws being implemented is all these other agencies that are basing their stance on what happens. And if we don't see accidents go up or violence or crime go up, and instead we might even see it go down, and use by minors might even go down rather than go up, then those things are going to show these organizations that they should support what's happening rather than being so cautious. They also affirmed their position that the research should be expedited for medicinal purposes, that the status as Schedule 1, which that means it's considered highly addictive, has no medicinal value, and cannot even be used under a doctor's guidance safely. And that is the category that cannabis is placed in, the highest category of our narcotic scheduling. But they do believe that the research should be done to facilitate development of cannabinoid-based medicines and alternate delivery methods. So to me, this is a problem because they're basically endorsing what is said in the other studies to not work as well. That whole plant material that you can consume in a method that you can titrate yourself easily, like smoking or vaporizing, is preferable to most patients. So they're more looking to make a Marinol or a Sativex or types of pharmaceuticals rather than allowing or pushing for the whole plant material. So I think this is something we need to all consider as we push for medical laws, and that perhaps it's time that we have a substance that is not contraband for anyone, no matter what your condition, and that within that framework, where the substance is no longer contraband, we can have benefits for those who are ill. We have benefits for people who are ill, who require medicine, but we can have a legal product that people have access to no matter their illness. And I think we're at the stage, that tipping point, now that Washington and Colorado have done so, that that's something we'll see happening more and more without necessarily needing a medical law. To me, a medical law is just a barrier to people who aren't dying yet, or people who aren't sick enough. You know, it's beneficial for all of us. So while we've always prioritized NORML as an organization, we as advocates have always prioritized the needs of patients, because people were not ready for full legalization yet. But if they are, then I believe that everyone should have access. Anybody else? Because Vincent is going to talk about the issues that patients have. And patients can be a huge example of why we need legalization. They can show the medical reasons very, very plainly. And that should be a reason that we should all have access. And another reason, this came out earlier this year, that the ACLU did a 10-year study that showed nationwide blacks were arrested at almost 4 times the rate as whites. And recently there's been some state studies that are doing more focused information, and Maryland just came out with their state report based on that same data, showing that blacks are arrested at twice the rate of whites. And in 2010, in the state of Maryland, 1 out of every 245 people had been arrested for marijuana possession. That's a pretty common activity when you're talking about that many people. Kind of blows that gateway theory out of the water, because I'm pretty sure 1 in 245 people are probably not addicted to heroin or meth in Maryland. And only 6 states actually reported more possession arrests in 2010 than Maryland, and Texas was number 2 in line. New York had more arrests. Like, we're number 2. No. But the ACLU has recommended that the states allow adult use of cannabis to be taxed and regulated. In a recent poll, 51% of voters in Maryland support statewide legalization, and 80% believe that personal possession should be a fine only rather than criminal prosecution. So this is one of the ways that we've started focusing our message with people is I've gone and spoken to the NAACP in Austin and in San Antonio and talked to them about this report, because it came out in June. And they're very interested. They're not necessarily interested in full legalization, but they're very interested in the fact that the laws are being applied disproportionately. And that point resonated with them. And we actually got an email from them since I've been in touch. And they have a Freedom Fund banquet that's happening next month. And we put an ad in their a half-page ad in the booklet for the banquet. I have a few copies of it at the table if anybody wants to see it, or if you haven't seen it online, it's like our cover page on Facebook. But we focus on that specific message. And that's one thing I kind of want to talk to you guys a little bit more, and we can talk one-on-one too, but focusing your message on who you're talking to is huge, because they are not interested in hearing about full legalization or retail sales or what different kind of strains you get to have, but they are very interested in hearing that they're being arrested, that they're being discriminated against, again, of course. But so targeting your message and not just overwhelming somebody with information is huge. And we have a handout at the table and online that is our education package. We put it together last year, or earlier this year, I guess, and distributed to the legislators and to our members and supporters, had them get in touch with their legislators and staff and sit down with them, go over the points. It's pretty comprehensive, but it covers industrial, medical, and decrim, and has a lot of good references. I don't expect you to ever give anyone all of this information in a conversation. Please don't. Because you're going to come across, like, you have the cars that you see driving by covered in bumper stickers, and you might agree with 1 or 2, but you can't actually focus on it long enough to figure out what they even say. So this should be a resource for you or something you give to someone to peruse, but don't try to just overwhelm someone with everything you know. We've got, hundreds, thousands of years of information and knowledge on cannabis. So I find it's better if you find someone that's opposed or that's concerned to ask them what their concerns are and then use the information that you found here or that you find otherwise to address those concerns, because only then are they really going to be able to hear all the benefits you want to tell them about. Sorry, little dry mouth. So what's happening across the country? We have Maryland showing 50%, in Wisconsin 50% of voters in a poll recently agreed with the statement marijuana use should be made legal. Only 45% disagreed. And in Wisconsin, their initial first offender possession charge isn't that bad. It's a misdemeanor. It's similar to here with the lower fine. But subsequent possession offenses are felonies with up to 3.5 years in prison. So this is just another in a series that we're seeing statewide surveys showing more than half of adults supporting legalization, including California, Florida, which I'm about to tell you about, Louisiana, my home state, Maryland, Michigan, and Texas, which we talked about last month, showing over half of Texans supportive of legalization. So I think the word's getting out, so you guys just need to keep doing what you're doing. And out of Florida, 80% supporting medical marijuana. That is the highest level of support for medical in Florida. So I think some of our senior citizens are waking up to the message, should grandma smoke pot? Robert Platshorn puts forward, if you've ever seen that. He has the Silver Tour reaching out to our seniors. And we have our Senior Alliance getting started that's going to focus on that. Even among Republicans, where the weakest support was shown for medical in Florida, it was at 70%. They're still divided on legalization, but 48% still support it. So it's half everywhere you look. In Maine, we might have talked about this last month. In Maine, the largest city in Maine, which is Portland, approved a measure eliminating local penalties, which again, remember, we can't do this. But 67% of Portland voters decided in favor of a measure which eliminates local penalties for adults possessing up to 2.5 ounces in city limits. While state law possession of 2.5 ounces is still a civil offense with a fine. But the Maine representative that is pushing forward a lot of legalization issues, Diane Russell, says that this is a victory for science, for common sense, and for liberty. And she has pre-filed legislation for legalization in 2014, calling on city officials to respect the will of the voters and stop rewarding the cartels, start rewarding responsible business owners instead. We're going to see that happen. Everybody that keeps telling you, if you keep hearing like we do, that it'll never happen in Texas or Texas will be the last, this is just a snowball effect. So all these things that keep happening affect the conversation in Texas. So the lobby campaign that we have, our next legislative sessions in 2015, we hope to have some movement then and better progress than we did last time. And by 2017, we hope to have actual legalization in Texas. That's not too far away, right? You guys can get on board and say you helped get legalization in Texas in the last few years. That's going to be huge. But by 2017, there's not just going to be 2 states that have legalization. It's not just going to be Washington and Colorado. It's going to be another dozen states probably by then. So the conversation then will not be what the conversation is now. In Michigan, 3 cities also voted to decriminalize marijuana possession, and they're deciding this in favor of 63% in favor, 60%, 70%, all decriminalizing possession and transfer and use on private property of less than 1 ounce. Last year, 4 other cities in Michigan depenalized using similar measures. So it is happening everywhere, and when we're not happy with the laws that get put forward, just remember that it's never the end. When people only had medical in Michigan, they thought that wasn't good enough. Well, now they're getting decriminalization city by city, so it's all a progression, and we just have to work for each step. Unfortunately, some of those steps include being recognized as a legitimate industry and sometimes being treated like industries that we are similar to but not like alcohol and cigarettes in some ways. So in Colorado, while they did pass legalization last year, they've now, lawmakers have proposed tax rates that include an excise tax and a special sales tax. And those were voted in favor. 65% of people in Colorado voted in favor of those tax rates, and they will go into effect next year. But they will fund public school construction and oversight of this new industry. So it's a small price to pay, I think, to consider that we could be instrumental in ending people getting their children taken away, children getting their parents taken away, patients being unable to medicate, people being arrested, the drug cartel, I mean, all these things. When people want to complain about taxes, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. In Colorado, people can still grow up to 6 plants of their own, paying no taxes. So if you really, really hate taxes that much, you should be growing all your own food and your marijuana when it's legal. So, because I'm pretty happy that in January, over 100 retail outlets will sell cannabis in Colorado to adults 21 and over. When Texas gets ready to do that, they can have my tax money, because I feel like in the long run, what we're going to see is the upside down of what's happening with cigarettes, where we started out not having a heavy sin tax, but then it created health problems and medical problems, and so the tax had to come to account for that money that was being spent by the society on people that had cancer, and with alcohol with people that are in accidents or dying of liver disease. That's not going to be the case. While our opposition may assume it is, and this is their, okay, we'll let you have it, but we're going to tax it because it's going to do all these horrible things, that remains to be seen and proven to them. So there's no reason to think that once this is completely accepted as normal behavior, then perhaps that sin tax goes away because we've improved our economy and we don't want to drive it back underground to the black market. And we will have saturated the economy with a plant that anyone can grow, and if it's legal everywhere, the price will drop. That's just long term. Taxes and complaining about those things are immediate, and what's immediate also is people are still being arrested. So please keep that in mind when you hear somebody complain about taxes or any of those things that we could jump over to get where we're going. Because sometimes our rights are taken away as we're moving forward, and one of the rights that has been taken away from medical cannabis patients is their right to own guns for their safety, for their personal use, for hunting, for sporting, for whatever reason. And there is currently a bill in Congress, a federal bill, that to restore the Second Amendment rights of medical cannabis patients in legal states. So again, another reason that we need full legalization for everyone, so that we can't single out people and hold them to different standards created by different federal organizations or groups like this. Because there is apparently a federal identification card that allows citizens to purchase guns and ammunition from retail outlets, and that states that cardholders can't use Schedule I substances. And since cannabis, as we know, is highly addictive and unsafe to use even under the guidance of a doctor, we couldn't possibly allow you to have guns or ammunition and be on it. Although any patient having highly addictive or other types of medications that are prescribed to them are still able to purchase guns and ammunition. So that bill seeks to remedy that. And again, this is the kind of evolution I'm talking about. We wouldn't have held back the medical cannabis laws that were passed because they were going to do this about the guns. It's not an intended consequence or something we wanted, but it's a step that we're going to have to get through to get all of the laws changed. Okay, and last, before I bring up our guest speaker, it's sad news, but I think that we can at least be happy that a benefactor of the marijuana law reform movement, while he passed away, at least he knew that we're winning, right? So you guys know who Peter Lewis is? He was a former, he was with Progressive Insurance. He was the chairman of Progressive Insurance for a very long time. He was 80 years old. He passed away just last month of natural causes. And he contributed millions of dollars to this movement over the last 30 years. Although he publicly acknowledged only trying cannabis for the first time when he was 39 and then picking it back up when he was 64 for his chronic pain from a partial leg amputation. But he was a huge benefactor to this movement. So I'm very happy that at least before he passed at 80 years old, he was able to see the progress that we've made. Because in 2012 alone, he gave over $3 million, or about $3 million, to successful state efforts in Massachusetts and Washington. So where would we be without Peter Lewis? We don't know. Now we're going to find out. Is the movement strong enough? Or do we have the support without a huge funder like Peter Lewis to contribute millions of dollars, not just to NORML specifically or any specific organization, but just to this cause, not to any specific area, state. He just wanted this to happen. In 2011, he told Forbes magazine that it was just that simple. His mission was to reduce the penalties for growing, using, and selling marijuana. It's that simple. I deeply believe that we'll have a better country and a better world if marijuana is treated more or less like alcohol. More than half of Americans have used marijuana themselves. I am one of those Americans, and I know firsthand that marijuana can be helpful and that it certainly isn't cause for locking anyone up. So I'm going to bring Vincent. Well, I'm going to go down and talk to Vincent and stand near Vincent. He is right here on my left. If you haven't met Vincent before, he's our Director of Patient Outreach, and he got involved a few years ago and has felt that the movement has really helped him, and he's formed a group to help other patients have that same pride in standing up for what they believe in and speaking to others and educating others about their personal experience. So Vincent has a meeting scheduled later this month, and we're going to talk about that. But his group is called Patient Alliance for Cannabis Therapeutics, and we have, or PACT, so patients are forming a pact to be in this together, to support each other and empower each other. And we have information at the table on Vincent's group, as well as the publication that he puts out quarterly, the Austin 420. So he has some merchandise and handouts and information if you want to check that out when you, of course, go by our table. Let's hear from Vincent.
Greetings, my fellow brothers and sisters. It is my honor to speak with you as always. It's good seeing us gather tonight so that we can unite our spirits with empowerment, compassion, and activism. While there are many aspects to consider when it comes to coping with disease and disability, let's remember that illness is an act of consumption, an act of a non-discriminate nature that can affect our families, friends, co-workers, our children, and even ourselves. In answering the call as Director of Patient Outreach to interact with fellow patients, I have created a new patient support and empowerment group called PACT, the Patient Alliance for Cannabis Therapeutics. The core objective of PACT is to encourage and invoke patient interaction so that we as patients can unite, heal, and empower ourselves to adequately address the Texas legislature with the correct knowledge, manner, discipline, and etiquette required in bringing across the implementation of proper, safe, and adequate cannabis legislation in Texas. PACT has also been created to provide a safer and safe place that is acquainted and considered of patient comfort, time feasibility, and accessibility for medical cannabis patients to open up, confide, and share our experiences, trials, and successes. While we do have concerns regarding medical cannabis therapy, from medicinal applications to patient protections to legalization, what we all must remember and understand is that many patients' concerns and issues go much further than what most would even begin to imagine. Much further than just the topic of medical cannabis. The pact is about empowerment, and what does it take to become empowered? To become empowered, we must increase our capacity to make choices and to transform those choices into desired actions and outcomes. Empowerment is a process of acceptance that leads to knowledge, that leads to manner, that leads to self-discipline. Only then can we be assertive in addressing the issues properly. Each word of what we express has its own power, time, and place. Therefore, we must be mindful of what we express and the manner in which it's expressed in. Let's remember, our stories, our living testimonials are the very essence of our character, woven from threads, born of countless correct decisions for the quality of our own lives. It can bring the medicinal benefits of cannabis to light and the cruelty of its prohibition. When addressing the Texas legislature, there are some aspects that can come off as quite intimidating, just to be honest. Fear and intimidation can be overwhelming when stepping out from the cannabis closet. But nothing compared to the weight one carries by not coming out, by not saying anything, by living life in secret. This is the reason behind PACT, to break down the intimidation factor. A certain manner is required in how we choose to represent ourselves. A certain etiquette is required in how we choose to respond and retort. A certain discipline is required in how we choose to compose ourselves and our actions. It is extremely vital that we as constituents continue to make our voices heard and bring the issue of cannabis to the forefront. We must evolve ourselves to the level that is required. We must stay focused and intent on the sole objective that not only fuels our purpose, but also fuels the truth that we embody. We must be aware and conscious of the right we all have to express ourselves to lawmakers, for it's indeed how the political process works. By abandoning our fears, procrastinations, and anxieties, we can discover the truths of our reality to say what is necessary in expressing our own truth to power. And though I may have my own method of expressing myself, never forget that all of you have that power too. A warrior of the spirit stands up for and defends what is right, defends the innocent, and lives for honor and justice. We honor those who protect us and those who are willing to sacrifice themselves for our defense. We value those who strive to live with integrity and honor, and who practice the discipline to do so. The tide will eventually change and bring forth the compassion required and understanding what we may have thought never existed. That's why it's important to never base the trial of what a patient is enduring and experiencing solely on your own opinion if you haven't experienced it firsthand. Sugarcoating reality only magnifies the fears we suffer with when we can't face the truth, and we as patients have no reason to deny or exaggerate what is our daily trial and truth. So come on out and join us for the first PACT Empowerment meeting next Thursday, December 12th at Genuine Joe's on West Anderson Lane. And before you head out tonight, grab a flyer at the merch booth. It has all the details. Buy yourself a PACT wristband, become a member of TXNORML, and don't forget your copy of the Austin 420. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.
Morning when my work is over, I'll fly away home. Lord, what bright morning when my work is over, I will fly away home. One bright morning when my work is over, I'll fly away home. We'll be right back. Stick around.